Good morning, everyone. Welcome to MVUU. My name is Summer Adi, and today myself, as well as Robin Bausell, who is attending virtually, are your pastoral associates. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to those of you here in person, those of you here virtually, and to those of you who will watch the service long after this is over. So please turn around and wave at the camera to those folks online. I'd like to thank the quite capable team of people that help us run a service. Thank you to our welcoming and hospitality teams, to our music director, Chris Tackett, song leader, Joel, to our RE director, Stacy Sosa, and the volunteers who help run RE, to our audiovisual crew, which today includes Lee, Todd McNeely, Alex Stuckey, as well as Ann Tatum. I think you're doing the Zoom host, and Chuck Tatum on camera. A little side note, today our wireless, the internet in the building is out, and our quite capable team are running off the hotspots on their phone. It's pretty amazing. I don't know how they're doing it. So at any point, they may gesture to me that we need to stop and pause for a minute while they reset some things. And so bear with us, and we will hopefully not have as many interruptions. Thank you for joining us for today's service as we listen to testimonials from stewards talking about what MVUU means to them presently, as well as from one of MVUU's staff, RE Director Stacy Sosa, about what stewardship means for RE. We are currently in our third month of the year, during the third Sunday of stewardship. There's a lot that happens this month. We just had Pie Day on March 14th. I hope some of you enjoyed some good pie. We had March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, where many of us without any Irish heritage wore green, or with Irish heritage wore green. March 20th, which is both the spring equinox as well as Ostara, the third Sabbath in the pagan wheel of the year. March tends to be the month where those 40 days before Easter tend to be, as well as March 22nd, beginning of Ramadan, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam where those of Muslim faith start their practice of fasting throughout the day. According to Google, March is also Spiritual Awareness Month. Now, I tried to find out why and how that came to be, but I could not find that origin story. Although, to be honest, I didn't really spend too much time looking for it. So with all this choice, where better to practice spiritual wellness than attending MVUU? So welcome, and thank you for attending today.
Good morning. My name is Robin Bausell, and I'm a pastoral associate here at MVUU. We light our chalice this morning with the words by Eric Walker Wickstrom, for each and for all. We light this chalice for all who are here and all who are not, for all who have ever walked through our doors, for those who may yet find this spiritual home, and for those we can't even yet imagine. For each of us and for us all, may this flame burn warm and bright.
As many of you know, we have been engaging in a Baja 4 project. We came together during the pandemic and we enjoyed working together so much, we decided to keep on working together. And we're working on a project that we're calling DRY, our Desert Ritual Year. As many of you know, you look through our hymnal, the fact that our UU mothership is in Boston. So much of our imagery and so much of the way we think about things is coordinated with a New England landscape in mind. We sing of beautiful springs and gentle summers and gentle rains that wash away. And it's like, that doesn't work here, not in the desert. So we're working to develop and work through some of the imagery and some of the thinking that works more for us here in the desert. And this is another one of our hymn rewrites. We sing of golden mornings becomes we sing amazing sunsets. And if you'd be so kind as to rise as you wish and join Joel and me in singing it with us.
sing amazing sunsets reflecting on the land of ranges, valleys, mountains, and desert wandering grand. We sing of flashing lightning and rain bestowing rain, of birds among the branches, and springtime come again. We sing the heart courageous, the youthful eager mind. We sing of hopes undaunted, of friendly ways and kind. We sing the blooms of wildflowers up from the rain-soaked earth. We sing the earth's great splendor, whose beauty is our birth.
I'd like to invite you to a time of meditation. Today, we will be using a piece titled Meditation on the Equinox by Thomas Rhodes. But before we begin, I would like you to take one deep breath with me. As I share these words with you, allow your breath to deepen your connection to this time and this place, right here, right now, with our beloved community. Over our heads, the great wheel of stars shifts. The spring equinox manifests itself, and for one precious instant, darkness and light exist in balanced proportion to one another. Within our minds, the great web of neurons shifts. New consciousness arises, and for one precious instant, experience and meaning exist together as revelation and epiphany. Within our hearts, the great rhythm of our lives shifts. A new way of being reveals itself, and for one precious instant, the nexus of the body and the seat of the soul exist truly as one. Let us give thanks for those times in our lives when all seems in balance, for those times are rare and precious. The equinox shall pass. The revelation may be forgotten, and our actions will not always reflect our true selves. But through our gratitude, may we remember who we are, reflect on who we may become, and restore the balance which brings equanimity to our lives. Let us be quiet for a moment together.
If the people lived their lives as if it were a song, for sings out of light, provides the music for the stars to be dancing circles in the night. If the people lived their lives as if it were a song, for sings out of light, provides us music, for sings out of light, provides us
That was beautiful. When I reflected on today's service, the number 3 stood out. The third month, the third week of stewardship. What else can I tie into the somewhat loose association with the number 3? So turning to Google again, where I learned about Spiritual Awareness Month, as well as the rabbit hole of learning more about pi, Google is really interesting. I feel we could do this whole service on the intersection on faith and math at this point. So thinking about how to play with this number 3 a little bit during Stewardship Week, there's a lot of beliefs about the number 3, sometimes referred to as the power of 3, not to be confused with the show Charmed with the sisters. There's something inherently satisfying about things coming in 3s, a sort of rhythm, as well as possibly the beginning of a pattern. 3 blind mice, the Holy Trinity, 3 little pigs. Leave it up to your imagination with the number 3. So 1 is just an occurrence. 2 can be coincidental and interesting. 3 starts establishing a pattern. 3 also tends to be the minimum amount to represent the cycle of a story, a beginning, a middle, an end. And so our story continues. The last few weeks, we've focused on the past to the present. We've heard the elevator speeches last week. And today we're going to hear and learn more about some of the folks from the Stewardship Committee. The story continues. Learning about what MVUU means to them, connecting with the people who make this congregation, and reflecting on how and what this means to you. The story continues. We start with Jess Collins.
I'm going to start with a favorite poem that resonates with me so strongly, and I hope it does for you. I Believe I Could Kneel by Nancy Pegg. I believe I could kneel in so many quiet places where the pale sponge of moss would surely reach above my hips as I sank down and down, as the deer must in their beds, kneeling once, then once again, to lower themselves front and back before closing their glistening eyes. I think I'm the kind of person down on one knee and shifting my weight my whole life long, but capable of sinking far and deep to the bottom of something that might replace the religion I discarded, or make me really live in this body, or waste my life. I would like to live my way into being someone who stands back up and runs toward that holy forest. In 1998, after working for a few years in national parks, I first entered MVUU on Cromwell Drive. Upon doing so, I thought I'd stumbled onto some sort of spiritual utopian paradise. The congregants were smart, open-minded, always curious, and always questioning, which I love. Reverend Susan Manker introduced a cornucopia of topics, both intriguing and keeping my mind churning like the Coney Island Wonder Wheel. There was beautiful artwork on the walls, a lineup of ever-changing talented musicians, and a whole new world where being a non-theist was a very welcome concept. I kept coming week after week and even stood up on Mount Lemon with my best friend Ryan Stadler as Susan married he and his wife in a terrific thunderstorm. Ryan was the one to bring me to MVUU first, and now I'm an official member. And here we are on Orange Grove in this gorgeous building, so beautifully and thoughtfully decorated, with the church's past preserved, but with its future so carefully considered. And Reverend Matthew and our lovely pastoral associates are here to usher us in more captivating conversations. Family obligations moved me back to New York, but in 2010, while on my honeymoon, Tucson was a much anticipated leg of the trip. We were at Sabino Canyon, and a melange of feelings of excitement and almost panic washed over me. I exclaimed suddenly, "I have to go to my church." My companion looked at me very puzzled because I'd never mentioned a church to him, ever. But he agreed to rush there with me. Somehow we made it within 20 minutes from Sabino Canyon and ran into the building. I was probably driving. Found seats in the back and happened upon a wonderful service. I had no idea that it was Reverend Susan's last day. She was going to take her sabbatical, and what she spoke of convinced me and compelled me that I wanted to be back at the only place where I felt rooted and connected, to come back to Tucson and to MVUU. And as Nancy Pegg expresses in her eloquent and ethereal poem, which I've shared with you, to live my way into being someone who stands back up and runs toward that holy forest. Thank you.
What does stewardship mean to me as a parent and religious educator? It means that our children have a place and a future here at MVUU. It means we get to create a place that children can be free to learn, explore, and to seek their truth. It helps them build a strong foundation and a faith that will inspire them. It means to help foster relationships, mentorships, friendships, and develop a sense of community with their peers. To give them a safe place to have open and honest conversations. Your contributions will help fund future educators to support our children as they grow, and as we grow as a congregation. Fund our OWL program, which supports our kids in discovering their sexual identities and give them reproductive health. We'll fund family-friendly activities that families can participate in that will help promote connection, inspiration, and acceptance. So thank you for giving our children at Mountain Vista all of this and so much more. Thank you.
This thing scares me, just to tell you right now. I never know where to stand. Good morning. My name is Karen White, and this is the story about how I came about to be at MVUU. I was 5 when my parents took me to Tuesday school at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Phoenix. I fondly remember my Tuesday school teacher, Mrs. Peggy Gooding. I had the pleasure of meeting her again later as a youth delegate at General Assembly, and she was still awesome. For some reason, our family didn't go back to church again until I was in high school. I started attending the church youth group LRY, Liberal Religious Youth, and it changed my life. The minister, Reverend Raymond Manker, was a big supporter of the youth in our church and of me. I stopped going to church when I moved to Tucson in 1982 to attend the University of Arizona. I attended the Northwest congregation a couple of times when I learned that Reverend Susan Manker was the minister. After all, her father, Ray Manker, was the minister of my church and a founder of Camp de Benneville Pines, which had become my spiritual home as a young person. And her brother, David Manker, was one of my best friends and cohorts in LRY. However, at the time, I was too busy working, going to school, and spending time with my partner, family, and friends to attend regularly. forgot to take my clip off. My partner Chris and I spent pretty much all of our free time hiking, backpacking, and camping on our VW camper during those early years. We loved the outdoors. Then one day in 2005, there was a reunion of all the Pacific Southwest District LRY YRUU youth groups who had attended the camp since the 1960s. Let's just say it was another life-altering experience, which left me thinking about my UU roots and my LRY experiences. Soon after another reunion, I heard of the untimely death of a much younger YRUU friend, Sabrina Stadler. Her shocking and unexpected death brought me to the Northwest congregation once again, this time while Reverend Ron Fairs was at the helm. I intuitively knew I was in a safe space to express my grief. In my heart, I wanted to be here, but in my mind, I was just too busy with work, etc., life. I sporadically kept up with the news of the property sale, new land purchase, architectural plans, leased church, etc. Then on March 3rd, 2020, I finally retired. At the time, I had a great part-time job lined up. Then exactly 2 weeks later, COVID-19 brought the world to a standstill. And I no longer had a job for the first time since I was 15. Next came the shocking murder of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020, in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I was traumatized, outraged, and depressed. I wasn't sure what to do or where to turn. I was so proud of the young protesters in the street, risking their lives during COVID. But at the same time, so angry that we hadn't finished the job. How can there be so much hate? How could I make the real change in our world? I started by attending virtual GA in 2020. And once again, I turned to what is now MVUU on Zoom. I honestly can't remember which sermon or service it was, but at some point, I think during a coffee hour, I met Reverend Samantha Wilson, and my life was again altered. After I started attending MVUU pretty regularly and met both Reverend Sam and Tom Bunch one-on-one via Zoom in person. I told them both I was ready to formally join MVUU. Shortly after that, I met Tom Bunch for a behind-the-scenes tour of the yet-to-be-open church and filled out my paperwork. I was then invited to attend a Zoom get-to-know new members meeting with Reverend Sam. I remember being nervous and thinking, how are we going to be able to have a get-to-know-you meeting via Zoom? I mean, honestly, how can you really get to know people over Zoom? Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. Reverend Sam had a way of making everyone feel special and important. Somehow she was able to create a sense of intimacy with a game. I don't remember what it was called, but before I knew it, I was digging things out of my closet. I was so excited for the official in-person opening of the building that I joined the welcoming and hospitality committees as soon as possible. I figured it was the best way to meet people. I was immediately impressed by the thoughtful and considerate process that transpired to open this building safely during COVID. Everyone I met made me feel important and loved. Reverend and Elizabeth Van Horn asked if I'd be interested in decorating and stocking the restrooms to make them feel welcoming. Next, Reverend Sam asked me to help her with the sustainability fund. Sometime during this period, I discovered that Emily Ricketts, a woman I had once worked with at Chimchie Laboratories, during the early 1990s, was one of the founders of this congregation. I think the universe was sending me a message that I belong here. This is where I will find my community to continue my self-growth journey. And together in community and with love, we will make change to create justice in the world by living our values. This is the reason I choose to make my pledge to MVUU. I invite you to join me.
Hi, I'm Sally Western. The journey that has brought me to MVUU has been most interesting. I was not raised UU, and I had no idea it existed until 2007 when we moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico. I didn't know anyone there at the time, and a church seemed like a good place to start, but I didn't want just any church. I needed a church that would match the way I was living my life, and I wasn't sure if it existed. Then one day we were driving around town and I found a church flying a rainbow flag outside its building. That was encouraging, but I still wasn't convinced. So the next day we attended the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces. I was surprised at the warmth of the reception we received, but most of all, I was thrilled to find the 7 values that were printed on their bulletin matched the values I was living. They matched the values I had learned in my Native American spiritual life. The words were different, but the meanings were clearly the same. The cornerstone of Lakota culture can be summed up in the words family and kinship. You see, we end all of our prayers with Matakuasin. This means all my relatives. It includes everyone I encounter. For me, this matches our first principle of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Wa'unshilape in Lakota means compassion, or to care or sympathize. Without compassion, darkness would rule our world. For me, this relates to two of the UU principles: justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. Another way I try to live my life is always to look for truth. It's not always easy to know what is true and what isn't. My Lakota value for this is called Wowichake, which translates to that which is real. This relates to the UU principle of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Now I could go on, but that would take me more time than I've been allotted. I do want to impress on you how grateful I am I was to find a religion that had very similar values to mine. The time at Las Cruces Church was great. When Don's work took us to Roswell, New Mexico, there was no UU church there, and I missed it. I missed it tremendously and was again grateful when we moved to the Albuquerque area and found First Unitarian Church. First Unitarian was a bigger church than I'd ever been in, and I wasn't sure that a church with 840 members was going to work for us. I'm glad we took a chance. First Unitarian was also warm and welcoming, and quickly put me to work on their immigration task force, which I ended up chairing. Then they put me on their board of directors. The 4 years we were there were very fulfilling. And then we moved to Tucson in August of 2021. I came here sight unseen. We have always loved the Southwest, and we were excited to see what Tucson had to offer. Naturally, I looked up UU churches in this area. We were surprised that there were 2. Baja 4 was still doing all the services in Zoom, and we quickly started joining the Zoom services. It was not long before we felt like MVUU was the best fit for us. We went to the MVUU website and filled out the online form for interest in joining the church. We sent it in on a Friday evening and did not expect any answer before Tuesday of the coming week. Very much to our surprise, we had an email answer from Tom Bunch within an hour. Wow. We asked if we could meet with him in person, and he suggested we meet at the new church building following the church service on the upcoming Sunday, which we did. What a surprise that was. When we arrived, not only was Tom there, but so was Lee McMealy and her husband and Reverend Sam. Everyone was so warm and open to us. We talked mostly to Tom Bunch and made an appointment to meet with Reverend Sam within a few days. What we have found here are wonderful people that really walk their talk. Everyone here is doing their best to live up to our 7 principles just as we do. Do I sometimes fall short? Of course, but we're all doing our best. I am so happy to be among all of you. I am humbled and honored to be a part of this church family. I will close by saying Wopila. In Lakota, that means great gratitude. I'm very grateful to be a part of this wonderful congregation. Wopila.
Good morning again. Many of you know me. I'm Tom Sawyer, and you can laugh if you want. Everybody does. When I first came to MVUU in 2015, I had spent most of my adult life without a spiritual home. When introduced to Unitarian Universalism in another state, I immediately felt connected to our 7 principles. Having grown up in a church environment where a congregation was warm and connected, but the theology was all wrong, I often missed what I experienced as a child. I often lamented the lack of a tribe, the lack of the same group of people, the feeling that I had growing up, that I often felt like an alien, living in a world where my values were not readily apparent in many people. Over my 7 years here of attending MVUU, I found my spiritual home. What makes this place a spiritual home for me are the wonderful relationships I have experienced and continue to experience to this day. Not the least of which is my relationship with my life partner, Deborah Roberts. I got that plug in case you're listening at home. What makes MVU such a rich experience is the spiritual greenhouse that is here. This greenhouse was inspired by those that met in Claire's kitchen some 20-some years ago. And it's been nurtured by many of you who sit in this congregation today. I will not try to name all of you, but I will not forget you either, because you have built out of this spiritual greenhouse a botanical garden. A botanical garden that is a credit to all of you and all of us that we have built this building, this place, this culture of welcoming and compassion. This place is alive, and like it, like all living things, it needs to be fed and watered. We cannot take for granted that places like this will always exist in our lives or in this world. It is for these reasons that I choose to support this wonderful home with my time, talent, and treasure. And I hope in this time of stewardship you will do the same.
As you can clearly hear, this church has had the wonderful leadership of some truly amazing people. We've had some incredible ministers. I can also say, because I know several of them, you've had some wonderful music directors over the years, and your leadership here has been very good. But the truth of the matter is that all of that leadership counts for nothing without you. Without those of you who sit in the seats, without those of you who come each week and participate in the various programs, in the various committees, and in the incredible outreach that this church has done and will continue to do on into the future. Without all of you, it's just me and Reverend Matthew sitting and staring at each other a lot of the time. And not that that doesn't have its charms. We really need you. And in that spirit, I'd like to play for you. This morning, we're playing several different recordings from our choir. We've reached back into the Baja 4 material a little bit. And it's my great pleasure. Please join us. You're welcome to join us in singing From You I Receive. This was a recording we made last year, Stewardship, when we were still doing the hybrid every other week, live in person versus online. Please join us in singing.
From you I receive, to you
Tremendous, tremendous thank you to Reverend Samantha Wilson, who actually put that video together. And a huge thank you to the MVUU choir, who put that together virtually, each person singing their own individual part. And then some poor sap had to sit at his desk for several more hours and assemble it part by piece by piece. But thank you, everybody. I say an enormous thank you as well. I try to say one every time to the wonderful choir and the wonderful people who participate in the music programs here. Because of COVID restrictions and the way things came up this last year, we found ourselves suddenly having to, in December, pivot again and go back to singing virtually. By that point, we had rehearsed and worked on a piece called Not in Our Town that fit the Hanukkah theme last year. It's a difficult story about a community, Billings, Montana, and what happens when, first of all, anti-Indigenous sentiment rose. An enormous wave of white supremacy had come through Montana at that time, and caught in that was the Jewish community of Billings, Montana, granted a teeny tiny part of the community in Billings, Montana. But what happened was one night through the window of a small boy, somebody threw a cinder block, actually a big stone. In this video, you can see pictures of the window and the stone that was thrown. The lyrics say cinder block, it's actually a stone, and you can see the stone in the pictures. Because we could not perform it live, we recorded it right here on the stage with the help of Lee and Todd as well. And we put it together with words and video. And with an enormous thank you to the choir, I'd like to show you again, Not in Our Town.
Five-year-old Isaac woke screaming in the gloom. I'm in my window, looking into my room. Son, there's nothing out there but shadows branches sing. Little boy went back to sleep. His parents lay awake. For Isaac's bedroom window showed a rain for all to see. Was not unfriendly. He said, "Ma'am, if I were you, I'd take down that menorah, the Star of David too." His mother Tommy said, "I'm sure that's good advice, but how then could I ever look my children in the eye?" Then fortune turned to a Jew. It read, rising from the bell, I'm sorry this happened to you. Have you seen the paper? Did you hear the news? What kind of people are we? We thought we knew. Good children, private prejudice, in peace together dwell. If we go through this shattered glass, do we see ourselves? Margaret MacDonald asked her pastor on the phone, this time our friends will not face their foes alone. We'll make mega menorahs, display them in our homes. We'll show the bigots there are more of us than they have stones. Shopkeepers printed out menorahs by the score. Children in their Sunday schools, colored dozens more. Though in the town of Billings lived not 100 Jews, menorahs now were everywhere, on every avenue. Through the drifting snow, Tammy drove her children round. Menorahs by the thousands in the windows of the town. All these people do it, as Isaac as they ran. No, his mother answered, they are your friends. One moment of conviction, one voice quiet and clear, one act of compassion. It all begins here. No safety now in silence. We've got to stand our ground. No hate, no violence, not in our town. Moment of conviction. One voice quiet and clear, one act of compassion. It all begins here. No safety now in silence. We've got to stand our ground. No hate, no violence, not in our town. No hate, no violence, not in our town. No hate, no violence, not in our town. Hate, no violence, not in our town. Hate, no violence, not in our town.
Beautiful, beautiful song by Fred Small, a UU minister, among many, many other wonderful things. And beautifully sung there by our own choir. And once again, I am tremendously grateful to them for being willing and able to pivot on very short notice. I don't know if many of you have ever worked in recording studios. It is a supremely artificial environment. And if you're not used to working in it, it can be very difficult. And I'm very, very proud of our people for standing up and doing it and doing that wonderful a job of it. So thank you. Mostly over the last few weeks, you've heard stories of transitions, of growth, of transformations. And if I may, I want to throw mine into the ring as well. Those of you who know me, I'm fond of saying I did not set out to be a church musician. It just somehow happened. I graduated from undergraduate school with a degree officially in piano. Yes, I played a lot of the classical stuff. I also had study in composition, in jazz, in conducting, in virtually everything you could do at a college music school. I went to a school called Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And then for graduate school, I went on to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. No relation, no connection. In graduate school, I studied jazz studies and composition, once again, figuring I would go on to a career as possibly a composer, possibly a jazz musician. Well, the universe sometimes goes, ha. While I was at Bloomington, I had the great pleasure, I was the pianist for the Bloomington UU Church. I was very, very busy at the time. It was graduate school after all. I had an assistantship, and I didn't have a chance to really dig into UU principles at all at that point. When I got out of school, bounced around a number of places, I wound up in San Antonio, Texas, and I got offered a church job. I didn't want to take the church job. So instead of saying outright no, I just simply said, okay, I'll do it, but I'll do it for, and I named a figure that was 4 times my usual asking price. They said yes. So there I was, playing for a church that was a seed church from a Texas megachurch. Super, super icky theology. Very difficult environment to be in. Of course, although I was not at any other point in my life, I was deeply closeted there. At that point, I was also helping work for a number of AIDS charities, AIDS assistance programs, and I simply had to, in one case, as I said in another speech I gave, I had to leave the bedside of a dying friend to go and play a service at a church that surely would have fired me if they'd known where I'd been 2 hours before. The things we do to make a living. I moved out here in 1997 to help my parents, my aging parents, who have both since passed. And I started working for a Disciples of Christ church, which was much better. But I wound up being music director there, and I worked for them for a total of almost 15 years. And it got to be a very difficult setting. It was a challenge. It was a difficult thing for me. Also, not being a person of any particular faith. I grew up in a Methodist church that was borderline fundamentalist. Difficult for a young gay kid. I'll tell you all about those scars some other time. But I wound up working for another church that was more compatible with me theologically, but I still had giant questions about this whole God business and all of that. And that, coupled with the large amount of work and the not a lot of money, I was looking for other work. I started working as a music director for Temple Emmanuel down in Country Club here in town, a Reformed Jewish congregation. There's where a certain amount of healing started to happen. I was able to finally cope with the enormous amount of grief in my life. American culture doesn't deal well with grief. If you've lost people in your life, if you've lost a parent, if you've lost friends, if you've lost partners, American grief doesn't really do much. People are great for the first couple of weeks, and then they forget about it. Through the help of Temple Emmanuel, I learned to be able to say Kaddish. And I was able to take a moment each day and focus on the people I'd missed and the people I'd lost. And I felt that I'd never been able to grieve in any particular way. All this time, my other job was getting worse and worse. I also learned from many years of going through the Torah with them, the first 5 books of the Bible, the different attitude that you could come and you could argue with God. You could actually stand up to God and say, hey, wait a second, I disagree. And that's a great tradition that's wonderful and respected. And I learned a lot about how to be able to say, I disagree. And not only was that not looked askance at, like it was in the church I grew up in, where they said, no, God says it, and the pastor says that this is what the Bible says, therefore, that's what is true. And you're not allowed to argue with it. I learned to argue with a God I didn't believe in, but still, The church that I was working for, one of the people got it a little hair and decided they didn't like that I was also working for a Jewish congregation. And I lost that job. And I thought, fine, I'm never going to have another church job ever again. Once again, the universe goes, ha. And in fall of 2019, at the request of a friend, I filled in and was substitute, intending to only stay for a couple of months till they found somebody else. I started working as substitute pianist at UUCT. Wonderful place to be. Then in March of 2020, well, y'all know what happened. We transitioned to online work. I got to meet and start to work with the Baja 4. I became the de facto music director of the Baja 4. And then through there, when the wonderful Shakayla announced that she was going back to finish up her graduate studies in Minneapolis, I transitioned into this job. And here is where a lot of the real healing and transformation in my life has happened. The things that started with being able to say Kaddish and to truly grieve my own past, to be able to fully work for a community that not only values every part of my life, that does not force me to hide any part of my life. When I look back and see my boyfriend standing in the sound booth in the back, and y'all are smiling about that and not going, eh? Like other churches have done. I am grateful, and you guys have transformed my life. And here I am, and I am grateful for every single one of you and for the incredible community that you all have formed and that you let me be a part of and that you let me steer. There are so many different ways that you can all be a part of it. Yes, we're talking about money right now. No, not going to mince words with that. We do need the money, but we also value your presence. And I cannot stress enough how grateful I am for everybody who takes part in the music program, in the media program, and in the various other programs of this church. I'm going to stick a commercial in here. Wednesday evening, 6:30, choir meets right here. I hear you sing. I hear a bunch of you sing. We could use always, you're welcome in choir. But this truly has become, no matter whether you believe in that particular God or not, or any other God or anything else, or the absence of God, the presence or absence of whatever it is you believe in, you are welcome here, and you are truly welcome to bring everything there is that you can bring to us. And I love that y'all are so open to all different kinds of music. This morning I'm playing music from Billy Strayhorn, American composer, also grew up somewhat near Pittsburgh, and went on to work for Duke Ellington for many, many years. He had a difficult life as well. Black gay man, 30s, 40s, 50s, difficult life. But wrote some incredibly beautiful music. I also love that I can draw from all different traditions. This next piece, I've got one piece left to play for you via recording with our choir. This is a text with a Latin text. It's from our hymnal, Ubi caritas et amor, Deus ibi est. Where there is charity, where there is love, there is where you find the divine. There is where you find the love and the community and all the wonderful things that so many people have found here at Mountain Vista. another enormous thank you to not only everybody whose voice appears on that recording, but also to Reverend Sam for her work in helping us find all these photos, and to Jody Bergedick, our editor and line producer for Baja 4, also the president of UUCT. Yeah, I'm still stunned that we had an Emmy Award-winning producer for our little church videos. And I'm incredibly grateful for all the work that Jody did that made everything look so beautiful. So I guess what we're really saying here is no matter where you came from, no matter how you got here, we're glad you're here. You found your spot. Here we are. I also want to say an enormous thank you as we transition out of this. I want to say an enormous thank you to Lee and Todd and Ann and Chuck and Alex, who literally are holding this whole service together with paper clips and chewing gum. And I am incredibly grateful. You'll find that there's a hymnal in your area around you. We put those there just in case everything took a giant. Fortunately, maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud. It hasn't. But we are going to sing now number 1028 in that hymnal if you wish to follow along. Otherwise, the words will also be on the screen. The Fire of Commitment.
The trouble is that now you've got the hymnal in front of you, you'll notice in 5/4. Never mind, look it through it. Of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you to all who made this possible. Thank you to all the folks on the Stewardship Committee and Chris for sharing your stories. And thank you all for being here today. You are appreciated. We have a few announcements. The first announcement would have been by Stacy Sosa for the RE. We don't have access to that video, so I will do my best to summarize what I think is the main point of this. So bear with me if I go a little off script. So as some of you know, we have a religious education director, Stacy, who works with volunteers to host the children, our youth who attend. Speaking as one of the parents, it is so greatly appreciated. And not only when we look for the treasure, but we also look to our congregation for your time and your talent in being part of this. If you have it in you to be willing to volunteer, consider, many of you are so talented. I think the kids would appreciate having, learning different things. But also I want you to consider that for many congregations, not just in Unitarian Universalism, one of the things that keeps youth in that congregation or in that denomination is the connection they have to the wider congregation. So think of what you have to offer. Also, one of the things to consider with that is that, I don't know if any of you are familiar with John Kabat-Zinn. He talks about mindfulness, and he has a great video on YouTube on the 9 attitudes of mindfulness. One of those attitudes that he encourages us to cultivate is what he calls child's mind, beginner's mind. And speaking as someone who grew up not really playing with my parents, I know this is something I've struggled and I keep cultivating with my own kids, is the ability to see things as if it's for the first time. It's beautiful. So consider even the act of volunteering is also a gift to you in helping you connect to that part of yourself. And so, another announcement, there will be a workshop on March 26th on planned giving. Please look to the details in the newsletter. Please join us afterwards for refreshments as we go out through those wooden doors. They are wooden, right? Yeah. There are wooden baskets out there for the work of MVUU, and the woven baskets this month goes towards Primavera Foundation. So thank you. Today's clothing will be by Robin Bausell.
We released the flame of our chalice this morning with words by Krista Taves titled The Work We Share. It is our work, shared with each other in covenant, that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice, but its light lives on in the directions we have chosen today. The light of this faith lives on in us together, in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits. Amen, and blessed be.